Emily Weiner, thanks for being here. We've known each other for a long time and really interested in your work with Houses on the Moon. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Tony, and it's great to see you.
You too. First thing, I remember you told the story a while ago, and maybe this is well known in the Houses community. Where did that name come from? Where did you come up with Houses on the Moon? And also, I want to hear about what you do. But first, what's the story behind that name?
I love this story, so it's a pleasure to tell it. I'm going back to the late 90s, and I was working in a school in Queens that was a high school it was called the Queens School of Career Development, and it was a high school for young people that were actually between the ages of 16 and 24 that had a variety of various developmental challenges and emotional challenges and behavioral challenges. And it was quite a diverse crew that we were working with. And I was in there as a teaching artist with my teaching partner, who was Jeffrey Solomon. And we were having an amazing time at that school, working with these young people. And we were also found it very sort of karmic the way that we worked together creatively. It just felt really natural and easy and exciting. And in that school at the time, remember this is, 25 years ago. Oh my God. There was things were very different in our social culture. And there was a tremendous amount of homophobia in the school, which no surprise. And it was really harmful to a lot of kids and teachers working in the school. And Jeff and I decided we wanted to create a piece of theater that spoke to that, to the experience and life of young people and educators when it came to LGBTQ plus experience. Because there wasn't anything like that we knew of at the time, and we wanted to just make something together. So we set out on a creative process where we we took there were not TV shows with gay characters then. Things were quite different, and so we were sort of sourcing all these gay youth sites, like, and took actual verbatim words, posts from kids from all over the world that were talking to each other, and it was a real source of connection for them at that time. And with their permission, we put together all these incredible quotes, and then did a whole lot of interviews with young people and teachers across the country and beyond. And the name of our company came from this one particular teenager who was a student, lesbian, and a student in high school in New Haven, Connecticut. And we were talking to her about who were her role models. And she just came out with this like unbelievable metaphor. She said, I don't have any, and she said, um, it's like imagine your future taking place on the moon. How would I know how to picture what my house would look like? I've never been to the moon. Nobody's ever tried to build a house at such low gravity. How do I know whether to picture it on the surface or floating, trees and grass or just rocks? And we were just like, wow, that's what we want to do, is create something new, that is untold and that can provide sort of a home, a safe space where one doesn't exist. And so Jeff ended up taking all that verbatim material that we had gathered and using it as a transitional piece through these incredible scenes that he wrote. And then we premiered that play, and we called it Building Houses on the Moon. And it was premiered at a huge conference in Boston. And it was astounding the effect that it had on so many people. And we traveled quite a bit with that play for years. But we realized after we had premiered that play in 2001 that we wanted to do that kind of work all the time. in a much larger way. So we were trying to come up, for months and months with our third founder, Andrew Inkovic, at the time, who's a musician and a composer. And we were desperately seeking the name of our theater company. And then we realized it just like hit us. Well, we already have the name of our theater company. So that's the story.
I'm curious, how did these kids communicate with each other? You said they were talking with each other around the world. At that time, what was the mode of communication?
Well, it was these youth sites. So there were it's so long ago that I wish I could remember like details, but there were these that they would post, they'd write in, it was
Hmm.
sort of the beginning of really using computers more widely, and the internet, and there were they had started these sites, where they could talk to each other and reach out. So it was a real, whereas there was and still is, so much isolation depending on where you are geographically and what your own story is in the world. So it was a refuge for so many kids who were terrified and alone and hiding and, you know, um,
Hmm.
yeah.
And I can imagine that and I want to hear a little bit about how you develop your work, your plays. But do you find that people still keep in contact with you after a production is over and they're still communicating with you? Um,
Are you talking about audiences or artists or who?
well, I guess audiences, artists, whoever your productions really touch, do you find that you still have an ongoing communication with the community of people from whom you develop your stories?
Yes, um, very much so. Part of our mission, from the beginning was always to develop and create our own work, but to do it in partnership with community organizations and individuals that we sort of source or that either we find or they find us. So it's central to the work that we do. And I guess this ties in a little bit with our process, to answer your question, but our process starts with trying to investigate and find what is the story that we want to tell now with this beginning something new. So I can use many examples, but if I sort of go through the process of how we make something, it'll make more sense in terms of how we stay connected. Is that
Yeah.
useful? Yeah. I'll use in 2013, we set out to create something, and we didn't know what it was, but we knew that we wanted to explore gun violence in America and how it was affecting folks from all walks. So we put a proposal out, for participants that wanted to participate in a creative workshop series, that we met, and we got a lot of people involved that responded. Some of them found us through organizations that they knew of or just other people, and um, so we would meet once a week, and we didn't know where it was heading exactly, but we were all sort of writing and telling our own stories. And these were people that were all affected by gun violence in one way or another, and there was quite a large span there in terms of who was there and what their experiences were, ranging from, being a victim of gun violence to being somebody who lost somebody to gun violence to being somebody who, you know, committed crimes with gun violence. So there's quite a large span. So over the course of those 10 weeks, we did all these experiential exercises together, and everyone sort of started writing their own story through a process that we led them through. That became a storytelling performance piece called Gun Country,
Hmm.
that very simple piece, very moving, even very funny at times, piece of theater that we have toured with quite a bit. Um, and then the most fascinating thing from there was that two of the members of that group who had one had lost her son when he was a teenager to gun violence, and the other had committed manslaughter when he was a teenager and had served 17 years for it, and was doing a lot of activism work. And he had lost his mother while he was incarcerated, and she had lost her son. And they were very nervous about being in the same room through this at the beginning. And then sort of what happened through the process was they formed this really touching and quite beautiful relationship. And so once Gun Country had been created, we decided, Jeff and I and those two individuals I'm talking about, we wanted to sort of keep exploring. And we ended up developing a play that was inspired by the relationship that happened between them. Fictional, yet inspired by that experience of spending time together. And that play became The Assignment. And we premiered that off Broadway in 2017. And along those years, there's several years involved from when we start something, build it, premiere it, and then continue to tour with it. We built quite a family of lots of people from all walks that are still our audience, friends, involved in the company in various ways. So,
Yeah. I remember I saw Gun Country, and I remember when you were workshopping it, doing research. I even wrote something. I don't think I ever submitted it, but
oh,
you inspired
you
me.
should, Tony. I want to see it or hear it.
Yeah, no, you inspired me to come up with a story of me being confronted by two guys with a gun. So, you know, just hearing what you were doing, I found very exciting, and the idea of coming up with one's own story. So I've always been fascinated about how you pull how you come up with these productions based on the stories of people, their narratives in different ways. How do you decide what to focus on?
Mm.
Your latest production was Happy Hotel.
Hotel Happy.
Hotel Happy. Great. It's just incredible performance, high production values. How did you come up with that idea? How did these ideas come to you? And then what goes on?
That's a great question. Hotel Happy was actually a little bit of a different um, process in terms of how it happened, and that than a lot of our other work, but just as important and interesting, I think. The playwright is named Camilo Almonacid, and he's a fantastic writer, and he has been working with houses for many years, and as an actor, as a writer, and as a teaching artist in lots of ways. And that was a dream of his. He's Colombian born, um, and has always sort of wanted to create this play that spoke to the relationship between America and Colombia, sexual tourism, and so much more. But so it was that was actually his dream project. And so we started developing it through workshops for a few years, ended up getting a really lovely grant, government grant for him to go and spend a lot of time in Colombia and do some research. Um, and it went through stages like that. So that inspiration for Hotel Happy, which was really such a special piece for us because it's like magical realism. There's so much humor. You saw it. And it was the first time we worked with puppetry. So we had this life-size donkey puppet that
Incredible.
actually got not the puppet maker, Matt Akison, just got nominated for a really, really important theater award for that creation of the donkey.
Mhm.
So the inspiration for Hotel Happy came from the artist, and that was more about us collaborating with the artist, nurturing the artist, working with an artist that has had a large effect on the company and is quite brilliant. The inspiration for whatever project we're going to work on can come in a few ways. So there's an example that I just shared. There's an example. There's many examples of folks that we know through the various communities or organizations that have come to us and approached us saying, we really want to create something that speaks to this. Could you help us? And so then, and we're doing that right now. So I can actually, that's a really interesting model because um, the University of Rochester, we have colleagues and friends that are associated with that university in various psychology departments and other things. And they've approached us because they got a huge grant from the National Institute of Health to do a massive national project that speaks to child abuse and neglect. So they want one part of that larger grant to be creating a theater project. So they came to us. They are collaborating with and commissioning us, I guess is the word, to over the next, we have, we're just in our first year right now of 5 years working on this project with them to create a new piece that speaks to child abuse and neglect that will eventually become a performance piece that will be disseminated nationally to schools that will come with a toolkit. So our job as the artists, when we're approached by someone else with the theme or the idea, is our first step is finding our own inspiration. So we're in the research phase right now. We're talking to a lot of people. We're gathering as a creative team of there's 6 of us. We're interviewing people. We're learning, and then with the goal of that part of the process, finding, okay, what is it from with us that we need, that why we want to tell this story, making it our own. Um, so our work, the ideas of what we do come in both forms, like either from the artist or from the outside.
Yeah, and so you do theater productions, but you're also educating in schools. That's a big, I think it's a big arm of your group.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Like, how do you work with schools, and what schools are you working with currently?
Our education program is actually right now is growing quite a bit, and it is a huge priority with the organization. Our work it's always been equally important to us that we create whatever we're doing, we create like excellent artistic, you know, work, but along with it, that it's able to be used in an educational way. And so with our productions, the way we've sort of done that is we don't just, go into a theater and get produced or produce ourselves in New York in a traditional theater. We travel a lot to schools, to universities with our performances, to hospitals, to libraries, to community centers, conferences, and present the piece, but along with it, we always have like really good, authentic resources to provide to folks who need or want, and interesting post-show conversations with the audience and with special guests that are working in the field of whatever it is we're exploring. But now our education program, while we're still doing that, is growing quite a bit actually in the schools, doing, in New York City schools. From right now, we're working with fifth graders through high schoolers in various creative residencies that get brought into the school for a number of weeks or sessions. And the mission of our creative work with students is about facilitating the group to find their authentic voices. And what is the story of them that is burning to to be told. So it's a lot of like self-awareness, that we're sort of guiding them through to learn about themselves and then be able to present themselves just not just to the world, but to themselves in the best, most authentic fashion. So that's really what we're doing. So we have a lot of different programs we do in schools, but that's pretty much what our educational mission is.
Yeah. And superhero, maybe can you say a few words about that production that was also really wonderful with Ian Eaton and the rest of the group, and maybe you
Yeah,
can also talk about where that's going,
sure.
where you're taking that.
I'm Thanks so much for coming to see all of our work, Tony. So awesome. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that everything we've done is pretty great in one way or another. But so Ian Eaton, who Ian, is a really talented, wonderful artist, actor, and writer. Now he's doing some teaching artist work as well with us. And Ian's story, the play that you just mentioned, Super, started in the Gun Country Workshop.
Hmm.
I'm just remembering that. So the beginning of that goes all the way back to 2013. And Ian was part of our group of artists, or not all artists. It was a combination of some artists and more people that aren't professional artists, but had a story that they were burning to develop and tell. Um, so, Ian's story is that, his older brother was killed as a teenager due to street violence growing up in Harlem. And Ian wrote this story during that time when we were developing Gun Country, a short 10-minute story, a beautiful story that really sort of speaks to, coming of age in a pretty tough neighborhood in Harlem, and losing his brother and finding a way to sort of get through, not that you ever get through it, but to navigate that journey within himself. And it was a story called Steve that really spoke to empowering another person, young person who was hurting, and how that sort of changed things for both of them in a really positive way. And so Ian developed that story, and it was exciting to him. It was his first real time sort of writing. And he performed with us with Gun Country for years, and then in his own time, he went on to sort of keep writing that story and developed it into more of a short, like one act solo piece. And he won awards for that at various festivals in the theater world over the years. And then the company wanted to actually produce it in a larger way in 2022. And while we were working on that in 2021 on like getting his solo piece into a larger form to really go to an off-Broadway theater with, we were working with a director named Warren Adams, who had the idea of actually developing it into a four-person show, um, based off of what Ian had written. And so we were all excited about that. And Ian kept writing, and it turned into this play, a family story, all still inspired by that original 10-minute piece called Steve. And the play was named Superhero. We produced that play off Broadway. It was really beautiful and exciting. And we are now, that play is something that we're working on licensing to nationally, to other companies along with all of our work. But we are now going back to the roots of it, which is Ian's solo piece. And because that's where it all started, and it's a gorgeous piece on its own. And we're going to be presenting that in September and October in the partnership of NYCHA, which is New York City Housing Authority. And we're going to be bringing that play to 3 or 4 different housing community centers throughout the boroughs of New York. So we're really excited about that. So that's happening this year.
So where would it be hosted in a housing center in a like a
So
community?
many of the NYCHA housing centers have like community centers, like some of them have a stage, some of them is just a huge room. But there's lots of activities that happen in these community centers with kids, with adults, different programs. So we're very flexible, and that's why also like with Ian's solo show, it doesn't need much. Doesn't need anything fancy. We don't need a set. He can do this play with a couple props and a chair. We don't need fancy lighting. It's easy to travel with. It reaches so many people. So we'll be at various, like we're going to be at one that's in the border of the Bronx and Upper Manhattan. We're going to be in East Harlem. We're going to be in West Harlem, at Manhattanville, which is actually where Ian grew up. So that's very, very special. And we'll be at another one in Brooklyn.
I'm fascinated by the long incubation period of these plays.
Mm.
That it seems that it takes a while for it to I don't know what marinate or something. Uh, so you have like a long view of these things.
I
Yeah.
mean, I would say the average amount of time from the beginning to getting it up on with the audience and the stage, like as a premiere, is like 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I did a brief period on your board, I think early on, and I didn't know anything about theater and was fascinated. I remember asking some really stupid, naive questions about research. Wow, you do research. Uh, yeah, I thought that was really novel, but I didn't really understand about how such theater pieces were created and what your process was. But it really helped me to understand just how um, a creative piece can happen by really, learning. It's not just it seems like it's not just an individual artist creating a piece, but it's also a community involvement and listening to different voices, and that goes into the mix. Is that
Yeah.
how you see it?
Yeah, that it is, that's all accurate. Um, and it's, we get approached by, writers and all the time, like wanting to submit a script. So I'm fairly regularly having to
Yeah.
say, with kindness, that that's just not how we work. So it's not about just giving us a play, we put it up. That's, you know, other companies or producers do that, but the process is in a way more important to me and to the organization than the actual product. Like the process is the meat. Like that's the most exciting part for sure.
Yeah, well, what's exciting about that for you?
For me, the most exciting part is not knowing what's going to happen. It's like just being really, even though that can be stressful at times, like right now, like it's a little bit like, oh, I wonder what are we going to do with this Rochester project? What's it going to be? How, like there's anxiety involved at times of like wanting to know, but nothing great in for this organization is actually happens if that's how it starts. So it has to be like allow ourselves to go on the journey and be open to what happens in the moment and let the next step come from then.
Yeah. I'm wondering, Emily, is there a story in you that you think about that you'd want to develop at some point in the future?
I spent many years, Tony, doing that within my play was produced called Shared Sentences in 2022. That was really, I don't know that we'll talk about that now, but in a way, like to take the story that was burning in me that I hadn't for many, many years been ready or wanting to do anything creative with. And then finally I was ready and wanting to. And I spent 5 years working on that. And we produced that play, and now it is actually touring in various ways to lots of places. That play is called Shared Sentences. Um, in a way, it was a really thrilling and exciting experience, and I'm glad I did it. I needed to do it, and I don't regret it. Um, but it was exhausting, emotionally. And so in a way, I'm very happy right now to be working on projects that actually don't come from like my own personal story that I need to. So I don't know how to answer that at the moment, other than what I just said. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I definitely would like to see that. I missed that particular one. Um, so yeah,
I mean, I can tell you briefly,
yeah,
keep it short if you want.
yeah, yeah.
Sure. I mean so that the play is called Shared Sentences, and it's set in a support group for people who have an incarcerated loved one or family member. So if you think of like AA, it's very similar to that in terms of the setting and what happens within a group like that. And the way the project started is, my I was, I had a partner that was incarcerated for a while, and my journey of with having no prior experience of going through the loving someone who wasn't here and learning how to navigate the prison system and the criminal justice system was quite shocking to my system. And very isolating and really I massive stigma I felt in the world. It was brought me just was did a lot. So after, that was a long time ago, and after many years, that sort of that experience, like being in it, was over for me. I wanted to explore that creatively, so I put out a call for proposals for other people that had had or have similar life experience to that, and similar process as Gun Country. We got together, we didn't know what we were going to do. We wrote stories, we created something verbatim, and then the pandemic hit, and I decided I didn't want to do something else that was like documentary. I wanted to try and write a play. I had never written a real, like a full play. Um, and so I took all of the stories that we had written together and explored, um, and including my own, and fictionalized some of it and wrote a play called Shared Sentences. So that's what that was, and it's been a real amazing experience. And so we're presenting that play not just at theaters, but also, our most recent presentation was at a Unitarian church in Long Island. It was such an amazing day, and we just shared parts of the play along with one of the real people involved in it. Read a couple chapters of her own memoir that she's written called Doing Our Time on the Outside, and that's Barbara Allen. Um, and then an amazing conversation with such a wild and eclectic group of people, some with experience of their own in the world of incarceration, some many without. And so it was just like, to me, it was almost a perfect day because we used our work and its great performances, to also do something sort of larger with it, than you can just do with a play sometimes. So yeah, so that's what Shared Sentences is.
I'm wondering too, you're currently in development with this story about child abuse, correct? And that's been going on for a while. I'm wondering, while you're preparing for a production, do you also have these other stories that come to mind that maybe you can't really attend to, but want to put on hold? I guess what I want to ask is, in addition to that story, what else is coming up for you in terms of what's going on today?
Hmm.
Where do you think the stories need to be told, and by whom?
Well, we have another we're working towards a production for next year right now. The Rochester Child Abuse Project is going to be over the next 5 years. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but we're in development right now of another piece called Skin to Skin that is being created by Jeremy Camps, who's a fantastic playwright, and his wife, Trixie, who is she's a midwife, and she's Kenyan born Black woman, and Jeremy is a white male American, and she is one of only very, very few Black midwives in America. And her experience through her incredible work and years to the birthing experience that women have based on often based on race is something that they are exploring together through this new play called Skin to Skin. I'm really excited about that. It's something that other than reading articles or like maybe seeing a documentary or something that I know nothing about. So it's exciting to me as an artist, and as the head of a theater company to work on something that we learn from, that I learned from personally, and that's thrilling because then it makes like the years put into this company and, the sweat and the tears of running a not-for-profit, it makes it very worthwhile when I can really feel infused with education myself. So in terms of what stories need to be told, I don't know. Like I don't know, but I know that there's never a shortage of stories that need to be told, which is why I admire what you're doing so much with Narrative Mindworks. I think I mean, we live, that's the thread of our existence, right? Like without without discovering stories through our life, but through living, there, I can't imagine what we would be without it. So I don't know. I don't know what, I mean, there's so much happening in the world. I think it's very individual in terms of like what what is important to be explored creatively.
Yeah, as that saying goes, may you live in interesting times, which
Yeah.
is kind of a blessing and a curse. We would love to keep talking with you about your work. I'm talking about Narrative Mindworks as a group
Mhm.
and want to um, collaborate in some ways. And so we're going to keep talking, I hope, and I hope we get a chance to work together again.
Oh, I'm quite sure that we will. And I'm all in. So
Yeah.
um thanks for what you're doing, and thanks, Tony, for wanting to even talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Emily. Really appreciate your time. We'll talk again.
Okay.